Alô. Bom dia a todos. Gostaria de iniciar os trabalhos aqui da continuação da 14ª
Good morning, everyone.
da internet no Brasil.
I would like to open this morning session. This workshop is a continuity of the Infrastructure Week, and we are about to open IX Fórum 18, which will be held today and tomorrow. And on Friday, we are going to have a different forum. This session is being broadcasted live by through YouTube in English, Portuguese, and Spanish. The three languages are being translated, and also if you prefer to listen to the original sound, that is also possible. We will have 4 presentations in the morning session with 4 different links, and in the afternoon you have to search for a different link for your connection and transmission. Those who are here on site, you are all invited to visit our exhibition fair, where we are celebrating 20 years for NIC.br. We have in the exhibition area several devices, equipments, which illustrate those 20 years of IX. Also, we have a number of exhibitors in the lunch area, and also by the end of the day, we are going to have the beer and gear, which is a cocktail party. IX Fórum 18 is an initiative by CGI.br, NIC.br, hosted by .br domains. Next, we are going to show an institutional movie by NIC.br and our sponsors.
Se seus dados particulares fossem divulgados sem autorização, ou se você tivesse sua navegação filtrada por causa de interesses comerciais. A liberdade de expressão, a privacidade e a neutralidade da rede são fundamentais para a internet. E esses são apenas alguns dos 10 princípios formulados pelo Comitê Gestor da Internet no Brasil. O CGI.br promove há mais de 20 anos a internet no país. Graças a ele, você tem constante inovação, segurança e diretrizes para o desenvolvimento da internet. Isso tudo é feito de forma colaborativa, transparente e democrática. O comitê é formado por representantes de todos os setores da sociedade. Assim, as decisões são tomadas por meio do diálogo, com a participação de todos os membros, até que um consenso seja alcançado. Por esses e outros fatores, o modelo brasileiro de governança se tornou referência no mundo todo. CGI.br, por uma internet cada vez melhor no Brasil.
Quando você registra um domínio .br, você está contribuindo para a melhoria da internet no Brasil, pois cada domínio que usa o .br é registrado pelo NIC.br, o Núcleo de Informação e Coordenação do .br, que além de registros de nomes de domínios, investe em análise e tratamento de incidentes de segurança, projetos de tecnologias de redes e operações, pesquisas que trazem indicadores sobre o uso das tecnologias da informação e comunicação, implementação de pontos de troca de tráfego local na internet, projetos que contribuem no desenvolvimento global da web e muito mais. Tudo isso porque o NIC.br é uma entidade civil de direito privado e sem fins lucrativos, que mantém uma estrutura de registro de domínio segura, estável e de confiança, e reverte parte do que você paga pelo seu domínio no desenvolvimento de infraestrutura, trazendo benefícios para todos que usam a internet no Brasil. Toda essa inovação, tecnologia de ponta, segurança e infraestrutura só é possível porque você tem um domínio .br. NIC.br, sempre em busca do melhor para a nossa internet.
Bem-vindo à EdUno. a rede latino-americana mais bem conectada do mundo. Mais do que tecnologia, criamos conexões. Em operação em mais de 15 países, fornecemos soluções de conectividade,
We create connectivity and safety. Our mission is to give you the best experience with innovation and excellence. We have the largest content in Latin America with the most efficient ecosystem in the market. Our data centers, strategic located, guarantee low latency, high availability, and connectivity that is superior to our customers. Transform your challenges into opportunities with Edge Uno. Together, we can go farther. The largest ecosystems in Brazil not only focus on Rio and São Paulo, but also different regions like Brasília, Curitiba, Porto Alegre, and the objective of the company is to work with companies' data centers with availability, large content services to offer for the Brazilian ecosystem excellent business opportunities.
A palavra térico deriva do grego téricos,
The
que
word
significa
TERIC comes from Telecos' final objective. For more than 15 years, Telecos worked with the objective of offering efficient, safe solutions to unify communications. With a global footprint and services in Portuguese, English, and Spanish, we guarantee the operation and safety of your infrastructure. That's why we can say we know about network. Our evolution is supported by three major pillars: technical knowledge, specialist team, and modern infrastructure. We actively take part in forums and events in the world in telecom, spreading knowledge to the community through presentations and taking the best technology to our customers. Our team is committed to provide safety, stability, and comfort to our customers 24 hours a week, 7 days a week. That's why we focus on training and certification of our members. We have NOC and SOC with all the necessary infrastructure to cope with highly critical scenarios. We also have a war room that works in a center to fight DDoS attacks in real time. We have a portfolio of solutions adaptable to the reality of each customer, focused on cyber safety, connectivity, and managed services. Protect and optimize your network, boosting your business into the future with teleco technologies. That's why we can say for sure we know about network.
Ataques de DOS são implacáveis. Em segundos, tudo para.
In a few seconds, everything stops. Connections drop, customers complain, and the trust is shaken. For US Pay, this is not only a failure, it's a threat to the future of your business. How to protect your network and keep the operation safe? Our Root Guard ensures protection against the most advanced DOS attacks. We work in the cloud with appliance or hybridly for your operation to continue active and safe 24 hours a day. Our IP solution has global access, very low latency, and high stability. Your data is fast and safe, connecting you to the world without limitations. With huge IX, your company can reach thousands of networks with a second interface, with safety, performance, and trust. Visit our website to know more.
30 anos não são 30 dias.
Are not 30 days. United to more than 3,000 partners, we share a commitment to foster digitalization in the country. We saw diskettes replaced by CD, USB, to the magic transfer of data to the network, satellites, applications, new experiences to customers, and the 4.0 industry, cybersecurity, PICS, AI. Walking hand in hand with customers and partners, we contribute to the transformation of businesses and reality, thanks to connectivity, safety, and collaboration. We are encouraged and ready to further contribute to the development of this country. Pleasure to meet you. I'm Cisco Brazil for 30 years, winning over Brazilians.
Ok.
Okay.
Vamos iniciar os
So
trabalhos
now we are
aqui.
going
A
to
gente
start
tem fazer
our
a
day
abertura. Tenho o
today.
prazer hoje de contar
It's a
aqui com o Demi
pleasure to
Guetsko.
have Demi
Demi, por
Gitsko
favor.
to open the floor. Demi?
Muito bem. Bom
Very
dia.
well. Good morning.
Eu estou sem fone, então estou trabalhando no loop aberto, como você sabe, em
I
loop
don't
aberto pode
have
gerar
a phone. I'm
instabilidade.
working on
Então eu
open
imagino
loop, and
que
as
tem
you
gente
know,
ouvindo e
that
eu
can
vou
cause
ser bem breve.
instability.
Minha
I hope
função
some
básica é
of you
dar
can
tempo para todo
hear
mundo
me.
pegar os fones de
I'm
ouvido
going to
e
be
poder assistir as
fast to give
palestras
you
realmente
time to
interessantes.
get your
Bom, nós estamos
headsets
aqui
to
no
be able
X
to listen
Fórum
to the
e
interpretation.
eu acho que a primeira coisa
We are
importante
at
é que
X Forum.
certo
Important
porque
thing
tem
to
uma
to
colaboração
say is
de
that
uma
X
porção de
Forum
gente envolvida
is
desde o
because
começo
there is
e
the
acho que
help of
essa
many people involved in
cooperação
the
é que dá
internet
força
since
ao
the start.
processo. E
That
o X, na verdade, é
cooperation
isso, é uma
gives the
forma de
strength
você
to the
cooperar
process. And this is
juntando
what
os
it is.
atores da
It
área da
is a way
internet,
to
todos no mesmo lugar.
collaborate
Nós
internet
temos aí 20
players
anos
working in
disso,
the
o
same
Milton,
place. It's
campeão da
been
história
20
aí, então
years
conheço
now.
desde a época da
Milton,
FAPESP.
the champion,
Antes da
has
FAPESP,
started
só
with
para comentar, quando
FAPESP,
a
and
NSF
before
entrou na
that,
rede em
when
86,
NSF
ela entrou
joined
na
the
rede
network in 86,
sacramentando o TCP/IP, né? Havia
working
quatro
and
backbones
to
principais nos Estados
sacrament in
Unidos, ok? Agora
IP
só
and CPC,
comentando.
there
Tinha o
were
backbone da NSF, o
four
backbone da
backbones,
Energy Sciences
NSF,
Network, que
Energy
nós
Sciences
desligamos via
Network that
Fermilab,
we
e
connected
tinha o
through FarmLab,
backbone da NASA,
and
e tinha o
NASA
backbone militar, o
backbone,
MILNET.
and the
E
military
a primeira dúvida
backbone,
era, bom, se você se
NeoNet.
liga no
And the
ESNet,
question
nós
was,
vamos perder o
if you
acesso ao
connect to
NSFnet?
ESNet, are
Não,
you
claro que
going
não, porque
to
esses
lose
backbones estavam
access to
interligados em
the
dois
other
pontos de
backbones? No,
conexão,
because
um
they
na
were
costa leste e um na
interconnected,
costa oeste, que era o
either
Fix
on the
East e o
east
Fix
or
West.
west coast, fixed east
Então,
and fixed
desde aquele
west.
momento, esses
So
pontos de
since
interconexão, os
then, the
Federal
points of
Internet Exchanges,
interconnections, the
eram já
Federal
uma
Internet
indicação de que
exchanges,
essa
were
era uma
already an
excelente
indication that
solução para
that would
interconexão
be
de
an
sistemas
excellent
autônomos.
solution for
E
the
aí,
interconnection of
evidentemente,
autonomous systems. And
seguiu-se no
then,
mesmo caminho. Na época da
obviously, we
FAPESP, o Milton
followed
criou o
along the
primeiro
same way.
ponto de
At
troca de tráfego, a
FAPESP,
gente chamava de
Minto
PTT. Na verdade, o primeiro nome foi PIR,
created the
ponto de
first PTT,
interconexão de
not the
rede.
first.
Mas
The
PIR
first
era um
was
nome
the
proibido porque
PIR.
rede era um treco
PIR
específico
was
de
a forbidden
telecomunicações.
network
Então
because
trocamos PIR
network
para PTT
was for
e depois,
telecommunications,
evidentemente,
so
com
we decided to
digamos, a
use
prevalência
PTT.
de IX,
And then
é a
with
palavra que
IX,
internacionalmente utilizada, nós estamos
which is the
migrando para
word
IX.
that
Então,
is used, we
primeiro
are
digamos,
migrating
uma
to
alegria saber
IX.
que isso deu
So
certo, né?
first,
A
it
gente
is
tem
very
hoje aqui em
good to
São
say
Paulo
that
o
it
maior
worked
IX do
out.
mundo, como já foi
Today
falado
in São
várias
Paulo, we
vezes.
have the
Durante a
largest
pandemia
IX in the
passamos de
world. We've said
Frankfurt,
that many
Amsterdã e
times.
Londres, né?
In the
Então,
pandemic,
essa é uma iniciativa que com
we
certeza dá certo. O
surpassed
modelo
the
internet
traffic of
brasileiro, com
Frankfurt,
certeza, é um
Amsterdam,
modelo
and
muito
London.
forte.
The Brazilian
Temos
model is
atualmente alguns
very
ruídos por
strong.
aí, precisamos
We have some
nos
noise
aliar para impedir que os
around.
ruídos gerem
We have to get
informação
together
inadequada sobre
to
como
prevent
funciona o modelo.
noise,
O modelo
to
é invejável, a
provide
gente usa o
wrong
PR
information
para
or
sustentar um monte de
misinformation.
atividades dentro da
We
internet
use
brasileira.
the
E o PR é
model
apenas um dos
to
domínios da internet. Não é
support
obrigado a
much of
usar
the
o teu
Brazilian
BR,
network,
mas claro, usando o
and the
BR você
BR
ajuda a
is
internet
one
no
of the
Brasil.
domains.
Mas
So you
qualquer
don't
domínio funciona
necessarily have
igualmente
to
em qualquer
use
lugar
it,
do
but
mundo.
any domain
Então, algumas
works
alegações
anywhere
do
in the
tipo,
world.
não, o
So
PR
some
de alguma
say
forma
that
concentra
BR
ou segura ou
concentrates
controla alguma
or
coisa. Não
holds
tem
back
muito
or
sentido, porque,
controls
como falei, todos
information,
os domínios
and
da
it makes no
internet têm o mesmo
sense
papel.
because
Os
internet domains have
CCTLDs,
all
dos
the
quais nós
same
fazemos
roles.
parte, têm uma
And
característica interessante, são
the
inclusive
ones that we
anteriores
are
ao ICANN,
part of,
quando o
uh,
Porcel nos delegou o BR,
uh,
que foi
uh,
em 89,
even
a gente tem
before
35
BR,
anos.
that was
Isso,
89,
nós temos uma iniciativa de
35 years
sucesso na
ago.
área, todos
So a
ficamos
successful
felizes e
journey.
orgulhosos pelo que
We
tem sido
have to
feito
be
aí.
proud of
Certamente
everything
a
that we
comunidade
have
tem um papel
accomplished.
fundamental nisso
Certainly, the
e a
community
comunidade é muito bem
plays a very
representada
important
nessa
role in
reunião do
that,
IX
and the community
e
is
a gente
very well
espera que isso é
represented
que dá
in this
fortaleza
IX
no
forum.
processo
And we believe that this is what is going to further strengthen the process and keep it in a virtuous cycle. So I wish we all have an excellent day. It's funny to speak in open loop, but I'm hoping everything is working, no instability. So have all a great forum. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, Demi. Vamos continuando aqui
Thank you,
a
Demi.
programação.
Well, carrying on with our program, I'm going to invite Ricardo Patar, that is going to give his report about numbering resources. An update.
Certinho? Bom dia. Tá bom.
Good morning.
Bom dia,
Okay.
tudo bem?
Good morning. How are you?
A ideia aqui é apresentar
Well, the idea
breve
is
report
to
sobre a
give
parte de
you a
numeração
brief
da internet.
report
serviço
on
que o
internet
NIC presta
numbering. This is
às
one of the
organizações
services
brasileiras, dentre
that NIC
departamentos de
provide
BR.
to Brazilian
Tentarei ser
organizations.
breve.
And I'll try and be brief and to the point.
Nas últimas apresentações eu tenho
In
mencionado
the last presentations, I have
essa é uma regra, é processo que nós
mentioned
já temos
this
implementado
rule,
faz
this process that we
tempinho,
have
desde
implemented
2021,
for
faz
some
parte de uma
time,
regra, uma
since
política aprovada há 8 anos
2021.
lá que
This is
NIC
part of the
é muito
policy
válida, traz muito benefício para a
approved
comunidade internet
within the
e a
LACNIC.
validação dos
And
contratos
it's
de
very
abuso,
good
quando a
and
ASN,
brings
bloco IP
benefit to
alocado,
the
tem ID
community,
associado a
which
ele,
is the
contrato de
validation of
abuso.
abuse
A
context.
ideia dessa
Every
regra é
ASN
certificar
IP
que o
block
e-mail associado aos
has
contratos de abuso funcione.
this
E aí é
connected to that,
uma
and the
forma de
idea
você
is to
contactar em caso de
certify
problema.
that this abuse contact will
Essa
work,
regra, como eu
because
falei,
this
já
is a
está
mechanism in case
funcionamento
of
desde
trouble.
2021.
This has been going on
Pela
since
regra,
2021, as I
processo tem que
mentioned,
ser refeito
and
a cada
based on
2
the
anos.
rule, the process
As
has to
pessoas
be
podem sair das
revised
empresas,
every 2
aquele
years,
e-mail,
because
aquele
people
domínio pode
can leave
não estar mais
companies,
funcionando, então é
the domain
interessante revalidar,
sometimes no
fazer uma
longer
validação a
working,
cada 2
so
anos
it's
para
very
certificar que
important
está
to
tudo certo.
revalidate it every 2
Mas também
years.
ela pode ser iniciada de
But
forma
you can
manual quando
also
há algum
start it
problema detectado.
manually
Alguém
if there
reporta
is any
problema, vê que
problem
aquele e-mail não funciona, o contrato
detected,
não vai, está dando algum
the
erro,
email is
a
not
gente pode
working, there is
forçar a
some kind of
validação.
error,
Mas é
so you
interessante
can force
mostrar que
validation. But it's
92%
important to say that
dos contratos de
92%
abuso
of
alocados pelo
abuse
NIC.br já estão
contacts
validados.
are already
A gente não tem como
validated.
garantir
We
que estão
cannot
perfeitamente funcionando,
guarantee that they
mas
are
que pelo menos
perfectly
eles
working,
passaram pelo processo de
but
validação.
at least they went through the
Aqui
validation
gráfico para a gente
process.
ver.
And
A
this
gente
is
tem
a
seguido
chart
ali
for you
patamar
to
bem
see. We have
interessante.
been following a very
Nota-se uma queda
interesting
nesse
level.
gráfico
You
ali
see
em
a
meados
drop
de
in
lá para
this chart
julho, e essa queda
by
continua até setembro, mais ou menos.
mid-July
Isso
up
se
to
deve a
September
reinício
23.
desse processo
And
de
that's
validação.
because
Como vocês se
of the
recordam, esse
restart of the
processo começou
validation
em
process.
21,
As you
2021,
remember, it started in
junho,
21,
julho de 2021. Então,
June, July
em
21.
junho, julho de
So
2023,
by
cumpria 2 anos, esse
June, July
processo começou
23,
novamente.
the 2 years
Coisa
had
que é feita
elapsed
aqui de
and the
forma
process
automática, mas
restarted.
rapidamente, embora tenha
It's
baixado ali para os
automatically, but you
80 e
see,
poucos
although it
por cento,
went down to
rapidamente começou a subir, a
82%,
gente já está de
very
volta num
quickly
patamar
it went
bastante bom.
up and we are
Não
already
ficamos
back
igual
to the
a como foi lá em
92%.
2020, no
Not
início de
as
2022,
high as the beginning of
mas estamos aí
22,
num bom patamar
but
de
at a very
92%
good
de
level
contratos
at
validados.
92% of validated
Rapidamente sobre
contacts.
alocações,
About allocations, very
nós
briefly,
temos mais de
we have
9
more
mil ali,
than
esse 8.900
9,000. The
ASNs são aqueles
8,900
que têm algum recurso
ASN
IP
are that
associado,
have
quase
some
9
kind
mil
of IP
ASNs no Brasil
resource,
com recursos
almost
IP.
9,000
Em
ASN in
2024,
Brazil with IP
fizemos quase
resources.
260
In 24,
alocações,
we had almost
volume
260
interessante,
allocations. It's an
não se
interesting
compara
volume,
a
not
momentos anteriores, como
comparable
por
to
exemplo,
previous times. For
pouco antes do
example, a
esgotamento do
bit
PV4 em
before
2020, são
the
esses
depletion of
picos aí que nós temos no gráfico, mas ainda
IPv4,
assim
the peaks
é
that
bom
you see
volume
in
que a
the
gente
chart, but
observa
it's still
mais ou menos
a good
estável nos
volume
últimos anos.
that we observe
Na parte
more
de
or less
IPv6 é muito
stable.
similar, cada um
In
que recebe um ASN
IPv6, very similar.
acaba
Whenever
recebendo
you have
também,
an ASN, you
quase
also
todos acabam recebendo
almost
IPv6.
everyone receives an IPv6.
Novamente, aí os gráficos se
Again,
assemelham
the
muito.
charts are very
Temos aí
similar.
volume
we have a stable volume of allocations of IPv6, and the number 97.7% is very interesting. There is some information missing that I'll explain. More than 97% of ASNs allocated by this bank have an allocation in IPv6. So almost all ASNs in operation. And this is also due to a rule of like NIC saying that if you request a resource, you are going to receive IPv6. And that's a very interesting chart, the pie chart. It shows the holders of allocation by category. So in orange, I don't know if you can see, are those that are micro, that is very small providers. They are small in terms of the amount of addresses, but it doesn't mean that they are not significant, quite the opposite. Most of internet providers that service most users in Brazil. They are the ones that get everywhere in Brazil to provide services to customers. Most of allocations for these holders are in this category. That is micro in the context of like NIC. And in this group, almost 100% of these holders have allocated IPv6. So we are quite well covered here. And the number in blue, at least that is highlighted in blue, the 89% is the category in this context. So the categories are categories of providers that provide internet services using IP addresses and end users, those that use internally in their own organization. So end users would be the category that have less IPv6 addresses, but still almost 90% do have IPv6. Allocation is a part, an important part of it. If I want to foster the use of IPv6, I have to have allocation, but it's not only that, I have to use it. So it's very interesting. There are several systems that measure IPv6 traffic. I use this from Google, showing that 50% of traffic that gets to services is through IPv6. This is Brazilian statistics. And just for the purposes of comparison, I had the same presentation in 23, and we had 47% of the traffic that got to Google was IPv6. We are now at 50%. It is a landmark, which is interesting. Very similar to an internal statistic at Registro.br. We collect the volume of traffic that comes from IPv6 and IPv4, and we make the comparison with our services, and we are at 50%, plus 50% in November, the last time that we checked. So in 2019, it was 27%. Again, significant growth. So really go past the 50% is a landmark and is an important moment in history. I don't know if you're going to be able to see, but on the PDF presentation, it might be clearer. The pace of growth is going down. You see that until mid-2020, there was an accelerated pace of growth. Then it changed a bit until 22, and even further, that is a further decrease in the terms of the growth error. We are growing, but we were faster in the past for the implementation of IPv6. But again, hitting the 50% mark is very important. One more thing about IPv4. We still have to talk about IPv4. There are still IPv4 allocations, although the inventory in LACNIC is exhausted. There is a process to recycle IPv4. Those that are recovered are redistributed to those who needed them. And this is the volume of IPv4 addresses redistributed based on a queue, an inventory of recoveries and returns of the region. This is again only Brazil. In 2024, we allocated out of this inventory 32,000 IPv4 addresses with some peaks. You see that in January 24, May 24, we had peaks of volumes of IPv4 addresses returned, but that's not normal. This is the exception if you take a look at the other bars on the chart. In November now, we had the last return with 6,100 some IPv4 addresses redistributed, again, just for Brazil. Now, if you take a look at the queue of IPv4 requests waiting release in the region, again, this is controlled by NIC. They have this queue with the inventory whenever there is a return, and the curve continues to grow. Now we have more than 1,400 requests waiting for release. And this is a bit more traumatic when we take a look at this chart. The line in red represents the amount of IPv4 addresses that would be necessary for all those that are on the queue, more than 1 million addresses being awaited. And the part in blue that is barely seen on the chart is the amount of addresses that have been released. So you see some variation in red when there is substantial release, but in recent years that's almost imperceptible. It's still about IPv4, although it's a lot more complicated, hard. You have to wait a lot for you to receive with recovery or return. Transfers are allowed. So if you have an excess of IPv4 and you want to help some other company, you can transfer the excess amount of IPv4 to others. This is a rule that is okay, not rent. Technically, it is possible. I have an address and I can borrow it to a company. Technically, it's possible, but there is not a rule that allows for that. But transfers are possible. And the chart shows the amount of requests for transfers that we process. This is growing. The last number, 131 requests completed. So the number of transfers is growing. It's natural. We can see that throughout the region and in other regions as well, because we see that there are some companies with an excess IPv4, and that is possible. And this is the amount of addresses. So you see, you have a high volume of transfers and requests. The volume of addresses that are actually transfers are not that much. That is, there are requests, but it has to be at least a bus 24. But anyway, in recent years, that is what has happened. And this is a very interesting chart. A long time ago, we had the concern, perhaps we still do, about what kind of destination we had in the transfers of IPv4 addresses, if they were in Brazilian companies and they were transferred abroad. This chart says that it is not like this. On the left, you have the origination of transfers, BR, more than 176,000 addresses being transferred, and 94% went to Brazilian companies. That's the orange part. So almost all IP addresses transferred from Brazilian companies went to Brazilian companies. 5% were transferred abroad. And finally, closing my presentation, Fórum is keeping my time. I would like to mention the LACNIC event. These are events where lots of things going on. We have training, we have presentations that are very technical, such as mine, very qualified people. It's very important events. NIC.br for many years now has a process of supporting providers, smaller providers, to enable them to take part. Every event, we select 15 organizations that receive support for tickets and hotel accommodations. And in LACNIC 41, we had 9 people selected. Here you have the states, a very good coverage in Brazil for the grant. So stay tuned. You can also take part remotely. It is a hybrid event, so you can take part, you can ask questions, you can sometimes even use an open mic. So if you are not able to go physically, you can also join online. And talking about policies that were discussed in the last LACNIC, the use of any cast, temporary transfers to address this problem that I mentioned. You know, rental is not allowed, but the community is considering other forms of transfer. So LACNIC is trying to organize this situation and try to solve it. And in May, we always have the assembly. LACNIC is based on members. Every holder of an allocation is a member. So in May, we have the assemblies. Last May, we discussed some things. We had an adjustment that was approved by the assembly in terms of IPv4 allocation prices to recover the costs of LACNIC in recent years. Inflation impacts all organizations. LACNIC is not different. So there was an impact with inflation, and in the assembly, we approved that.
LACNIC 42 took place last October in Paraguay, and some policies were discussed as to transfer, temporary transfer. That is a hot topic still. And this is another assembly to be highlighted, LOCNOG. Due to a certain concern from Douglas Fisher, who is a guy from our community, he's a member, as well as LAC-IX. Daniel is here and he knows exactly what I'm talking about. And after all this internal discussion, which led to a policy group discussion, and that became a rule which was fully approved in our last LACNIC meeting. IX critical infrastructures, are they being used as expected? And such a policy, it is added to transparency and some scholarships to participate at our events. And our next event, LACNIC 43, will be held in São Paulo. May next year will be at IMB Exposition Center. And please stay tuned where you are going to get further information about this meeting, and some grants will also be granted as well. Thank you, Patara. You really stick to your time. If there are any questions to Patara, please address them right now, please.
Acho que está todo mundo satisfeito com o uso de IPv6.
Well, there are no questions, as everyone seems to be quite happy with IPv6.
Dando sequência na
nossa programação, in our agenda, I'd like to call Gilberto Zorello, who will address a program for SaferNet. You have the floor, Mr. Zorello.
Pessoal, bom dia. Bom, tenho vindo aqui durante os anos.
Good morning, everyone. I keep coming every single year to give you some sort of update. And my goal here today is to share how our program is being developed. So the program covers best recommended practices. It also fulfills all the notifications sent by CERT, manners, kindness, they have to be in compliance, and also the standard tests, TOPs, TOPs. The program has a website with all best practices listed there. And the main goal of the program is to help to reduce DDoS attacks, to improve routers safety, reduce some sort of flaws and vulnerabilities in the configuration, to improve the security of names, and to disclose best practices to allow 100% security in the system. The idea is to leap from a network full of attacks on the left and several areas of NIC.br, Subtron, registration, CERT.br, web, IX. We have several actions, each one within our own expertises and field of performance. All of those attempts, they collaborate for the improvement of our performance. This is a joint NIC.br activity. CERT, for instance, discloses technical references. There is also a project which notifies to developers any possible IP address which may be under attack. Sectro, on the other hand, is very important for workshop purpose. And this year, we have a new challenge which encompasses, in addition to IPv6 adoption, also some security aspects. IX implements filters at their Internet Exchange origin filters. And we have engineering people and web people that work with the top measures tools. What I usually do is to set a meeting with providers where I follow closely all KPIs of the adoption of best practices, and providers are invited to participate at different calls. I started doing those meetings remotely in the beginning of the pandemic, and I keep on doing them. I have already communicated to over 250 operators. I do not follow closely each one of their actions. That's not the purpose, but I follow them monthly with a report so they do not forget about myself. As to security, we have a number of things to worry about. And if I do not send, or if there is any delay, people, they ask for it. Come on, I have not received the report yet. And this is a way that we get very close to our members and operators. We are also working very close to some associations. This year, we started a partnership with ABA Cloud. This is a provider data center association, and the ABRA Cloud Association of Providers in data centers, where they had adopted best practices with all members. They have then set a program within the association with their members, and their members are able to adopt best practices. This is a partnership. I'm also talking to some other associations which will develop similar tasks, working with the groups where they will disclose information, they will be followed closely, and best practices will be able to be managed. This is an example of a report which we send monthly with all the statistics and the notifications if we are improving at all or not, and which IP addresses could be used. CERT.br, since this year, is now notifying a IP version 1 of the services. It started dropping right in the beginning, and it's still dropping, so we have much more room to improve, but yet we see 80% reduction, and CERT reports that attacks in Brazil, they have been mitigated tremendously in Brazil, but not all the DDoS attacks. They were not reduced due to a number of reasons. SNMP, DNS, and NTP are the available services in Brazil, and the BCOP this year will emphasize, or it will try to mitigate the recursive DNS attacks. We want to see which networks had better implemented such a reduction. How about manners? Many of you already know this type of management. Manners is an acronym from Internet Society. BGP is unsafe, BGP filters, and anti-spoofing. Unfortunately, we do not implement them widely as we could, and that is an amazing, powerful tool which may help us to reduce DDoS attacks. So please, guys, let's implement the BGP's filters. Contact points, we cannot work on a safe environment if networks, they do not touch one to another. We have to guarantee contact points in the peering DB, HOIS, and IRR. The Cycle XP is our contact point for the site's connections, as well as TXT. This is an example of the Manners Observatory dashboard. Today in Brazil, we have over 9,000 ASs just in Brazil, and we lack of filters. We have hijack leak, which we had before 90% of achievement, but still we have 10% occurrences, and 10% of the networks that had applied anti-spoofing filters were not able to have all filters implemented, just 2% of them. Peering DB, the contact point of peering DB, IRR, and RPKI. RPKI is growing, and BCOP is working on anti-spoofing filters. And this is a timeline overview. Any routing issues that we had throughout the year, as well as the number of ASs accountable for issues like that. We also see a slow increase of RPKI, which should be speed up. This is a pie chart as to Manners participants. Most Manners participants in the globe, they are located in Brazil, and here you can see the number of growth in the past years. Kindness stands for knowledge sharing and instantaneous norms for DNS and naming securities. So here we are listing the 6 best practices. For the recursive one, we have the main recommended best practice, but that is optional. And any networks, NASPs, they have to consider that recursive ANSs, they are within their services. They have to be configured according to the best practices list. This is what kindness stands for. And how about top standard tests? Top is a tool which tests if the email service is set up according to the best security practices, IPv6, DNS, TLS well implemented, DMARC as well as any other security options. And we also perform a connection test. Such a test checks if user is properly routing to IPv6 and also recursive DNS, if there is an implemented DNSSEC. Top, though, is a tool which may help you to verify best practices adoption. DNSSEC implemented can help us in the recursive and also in the authoritative, in all the whole of execution. Connectivity is also considered, and we are releasing today for website and emails. We verify if IP addresses of web servers, name servers, and email servers, if they are all covered by RPKI. This is a way to measure and check out if IP addresses are covered and protected by RPKI. And the new feature which became available now is the verification of a file with a contact point in case you find any issue in the website of TXT. TXT websites and any other website should have a file associated with all this information according to the norm mentioned on Monday here by Christine. And these are the new features that we have in place. And we are constantly following top development, which is based on a NL internet, and we use the front end in our list. As to IPv6 adoption by websites, non-authoritative DNS and HTTPS. This is a way to measure those that had achieved 100% and the number of ASs that were scored with 100%. Same applies for email connection. And last November, we had a registered layer 8, everything in compliance with the program. We are also helping to disclose that internally, and layer 8 may work as a great reference for your disclosure. Here you can see a number of associations which support us, and that's it from my side. I'll be at your disposal for further questions. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, Gilberto. Tem perguntas para o Gilberto?
Questions? No questions. If there are no questions, I'll be still around. There is something else which I developed at NIC.br with some other partners, which is free spectrum occupation for digital inclusion. This project has been introduced priorly, and today I'm here to update the project. Not actually myself, but Professor Rodrigo Porto, representing the Federal University of Ceará State, and Professor Cida from Inatel.
Júlio, inicializa o temporizador. Inicializa o temporizador. O temporizador acabou. Já foi. Bom, pessoal, a ideia é a seguinte. Lá em 2022, tá? A gente começou
In 2022, we started a project where digital inclusion was our main focus. I mean, how can we take internet to remote users, users who haven't got a network availability? Well, radio is a way to take internet connections to remote areas, as wired LANs, they are much more expensive. And at remote areas, we have a greater non-used spectrum availability. And by that, I mean TV operators, television operators, they have their connection available to be taken remotely. So why don't we use those frequency ranges? And this is a project that we have in mind, thanks to a technology which is already available for quite a while, and it's called TV White Spaces, TVWS. And on a first phase of our project, we have developed a proof of concept. Such a concept was developed last year with some outcomes, and Inatel has presented some results where they suggest to the market less interference among channels. This is a very quite efficient spectrum for this kind of application. And we had tested that in the field, and it worked quite well. After this proof of concept, we decided that we could go on with the radio transmission by Inatel. And to be able to apply all different spectrums in an organized manner, we have to work on a database which will acknowledge all available ranges that will help to allocate and mitigate any interference in the broadcasting television system. Such a database was designed by the UFC, and now Professor Mateus is here to give us update about the radio transmission project, and thanks to some prototypes, we'll be able to carry on our field tests especially at those remote areas which are lacking of internet connection, as well as our database development. In this specific field test, our database will be integrated to our radios devices, and it will also be able to work together to commercial radios. And for that, Professor Mateus, I would like to hand over to you, who will briefly update the project. Following him, Professor Rodrigo will address database development.
Bom, primeiramente, bom dia a todos.
First of all, good morning, everyone. I would like to thank NIC.br and Gilberto and also the British government for supporting and financing our project. I am a professor and a researcher at Anatel, the telecom system in Santa Rita, which is a town in the state of Minas Gerais. Inatel is related to the Technology Institute and Research, and since 2013, Inatel is been conducting several researches on mobile communication, starting with the 5G and now with the 6G. Anatel also encompasses the main national project, which is Brazil 6G, and thanks to our expertise, Anatel has been selected to become a competency center for radio communication hub. And this year we have just opened this center, which we had named it XG Mobile. Any generation which will come after 5 and 6G generation. Now go into the third phase of a TVWS project. After those 4 initial phases, we have raised some technical subsides to help us in regulating all the norms and the restrictions that Anatel has today to broadcast 5G peak. They are quite strict with those alerts, and throughout GFDM, we are able to work on a low emission outside our spectral range, and with that, we are able to reach higher transmission power levels without hindering our internal channel. And that was one of our main results as a consequence of our first phase. In addition, we also have a suspected channel which has made quite clear a need of a proper spectral analysis system where Anatel or any other telco will be able to acknowledge if there is any suspected channel in the air. Activities 1, 3, and 4, they rely on radio optimizations. I will go into details about that in a while, but first let me highlight activity 2, which is a technical request and frequency studies for a prototype installation. Our first phase was conducted at Inatel's headquarters site, but our main goal is to allow connectivity, digital inclusion in rural and remote areas. And now UFC has a headquarters in the countryside of Ceará state on a very remote area, and they still need additional coverage where digital inclusion will be implemented. After a technical visit together with Professor Rodrigo and Gilberto, we visit the site and conducted some spectrum measures for further validation. And not to be caught by surprise, as it happened with another Anatel project, as so far our database is not yet implemented. But a number of tests were conducted in that site where we visited the rural area of their town, where all proper measurements were done and possible further candidates were also detected. So we have some closer areas as well as more distant remote areas, which would require additional coverage. Here you see some pictures of our campus and our radio base infrastructure in the UFC and some other possible places where the users base could be deployed. We are also testing improvements of our receptor. On our prototype, we started with a end-to-end version radio, but now we are working on a multiple exchange points where we are correcting some of our codes to allow that interconnection thanks to some initial prototypes. On a lab setting, some back-to-back or end-to-end tests were carried out where transmitters, they were connected just by one cable to allow and to avoid any external interferences. And we also perform some A tests throughout the wires that you can see.
And we also optimize with a good reception, and we reached our target that radio can have 120 megabits a second using a band of 24 megahertz, and we use 4 channels for the transmission. And we also had tests for poor conditions. You know that the radio is adaptive and we can change modulation according to the signal noise ratio. So in a poor connection, getting to the threshold of power of reception, we would have 82 dBms and 12 megabits per second. We had some tests for the long-term test, and in the end, we get to verifying stability, activities 4, 5, 6, and 7, which is the integration of our radio to communicate with the database that is being developed by UFC. So the whole system has to be working, and with some initial tests are being performed. So on this diagram, you have our station that is going to communicate to the database. That is going to be the first database of TV white space in Brazil. We are using the protocol that is internationally used for white space, which is POLS. And what we propose for the communication then is to use the protocol, and then we are going to provide to the database the information on the radio, the latitude where we are installed, and the database is going to return which channels are free at that place and the potency amounts that we can use. So this communication is already starting with the software that was developed in our lab. And with regards to the spectral sensing, this is something that also users are going to be able to do because we have remote users. So we need at the front end to also have this spectral sensing, and they are going to send the information to the base radio, and then they will merge the information. so that we can communicate and think of mechanisms, I don't know, of alert for regulatory bodies and for the database to know that at that place channels are indeed free or not, that they are occupied. And you have to know if it is an undue use or if someone had a last minute request that was not informed or not detected by Anatel. We're still working with email alerts. For that, we have some emails on our software so that when a channel is being used, we use the emails so that we know that the spectrum is being occupied. Here you have some more images of the tests. Of the communication between the radio and the database. And finally, we get to the spectral sensing, and we are studying different techniques to know which one would be best for the communication and also to have the best sensing of the spectrum so that we can have communication and also be able to inform everyone in due time. This is what I had to show you. I don't know if I went past the time, but thanks, Gilberto and Nick. And questions are going to be in the end, right? Yep.
Os slides vão. Tá. Tá bom. Muito bom dia, colegas.
Good morning,
Desse evento tão bem
colleagues,
organizado pelo
for
NIC.br,
such well-organized
qual já
event
agradeço
by
por mais
NIC.br.
me convidando
I
para
thank
participar,
you for
prazer.
another year of
E nesse pouco
invitation.
tempo que eu vou
It's a
ter, eu
pleasure.
gostaria então de
I'm
falar
going to
desse
have
nosso
very
projeto
little time,
sobre
but I would like
o
to
uso
talk
dos
about
espaços em
this
branco de
project,
TV.
which is used of TV white spaces.
Esse é um projeto fundamentalmente sobre
This
inclusão
is a
digital.
project
Essa é a principal
that has to
mensagem que
do with
vocês devem
digital
levar.
inclusion. This is the
Inclusão
first
digital em áreas
takeaway
carentes
message.
de conectividade.
Digital
Nós estamos
inclusion
falando
in
aqui de
areas that
áreas
are poor in
remotas e áreas
connectivity, that
na
is
zona rural.
remote areas or rural areas,
Notadamente, interior do Nordeste do Brasil,
notably the
exemplo. E outras
in-country of the
regiões onde essa é
Northeast
uma
Brazil
realidade.
and in other
Existe
regions where
mais de
this
uma
is a
opção
reality.
de
We have
tecnologia
more
de
than one
família
option of last
para
mile
dar esse
technology
acesso a
to
essas
give
comunidades, esses
access to
distritos,
these
essas zonas
communities,
isoladas.
regions, and
Certamente,
isolated
muitos têm
areas.
falado sobre o
Many
acesso à
have
internet via
talked
satélite.
about satellite
A TV White
internet.
Space é uma alternativa de
TV
mais
white
uma
space is an
opção que seria
alternative. It's another
complementar ao
option
satélite.
that
Não é
would be
necessariamente
complementary to
competitivo.
satellites. It's
Uma
not
tecnologia,
necessarily a
portanto, de transmissão
competition.
terrestre,
So it
que
is
usa esse
a
espectro
ground
de forma
technology
secundária e com isso
using
a
the
gente tem a
spectrum in a
expectativa de
secondary manner.
custo
And
mais
with that,
reduzido
we
para esse
have an
acesso, o que
expectation of
correlaciona
a cheaper cost,
potencialmente com as condições
which has to
socioeconômicas de
do with
muitas
the
dessas comunidades.
socioeconomic
Então,
conditions
esse é o
of many of
racional
these
do projeto.
communities. So this
Tá?
is the rationale of the
Basicamente, essa
project.
tecnologia você precisa
And
pensar em
basically,
duas
this
componentes,
technology, you have to think of
e
two
uma
components,
base
a
de
radio
dados.
and a
Certo?
database.
O rádio
A
consulta a base de
radio
dados, a base de
consults
dados
the
autoriza os
the
canais
database.
disponíveis
The
utilizando
database
modelos de propagação de
authorizes
protocolo
available
de
channels
comunicação.
using a
Essa é a lógica.
communication
A
protocol.
divisão
This
de
is the
escopo, a
rationale.
UFC, então, tem
Then you
desenvolvido
have
já há 2 anos essa base de
UFC
dados.
developing the
Eu
database
queria
for
passar
2
algumas
years now,
mensagens-chave
and I'd
nesse pouco
like
tempo que
to
eu
give
tenho.
you
Primeira,
some
a
takeaway
base de
messages. I have
dados,
very little
ela
time.
funciona
First,
como
the
uma
database
API, utilizando
works as an
protocolo
API
chamado
using a
PAWS,
protocol
PAWS, que é
called
Protocolo de Acesso a White
PAWS,
Spaces,
which is White
padronizado por um
Space
RFC.
Access
Portanto, ele
Protocol.
pode ser compatível com equipamentos
RFC,
fabricados no mundo
that
inteiro.
is, it is compatible
Nós
to equipment
implementamos esse
manufactured
protocolo, ele foi
everywhere in the
validado
world.
por uma
We
entidade que fez o
implemented the
papel de uma
protocol, it
certificadora
was
internacional,
validated
ponto de
by
vista das
an
mensagens.
entity that
Ó,
was
e,
our
portanto, nós
international
temos, nesse momento,
certifier. And now we have a database that works with a standardized protocol and that can talk to off-the-shelf equipment manufactured everywhere in the world. So that's the first takeaway message. It is already validated by an international entity. The second message, and these are activities of 2024 already, thinking of using this database commercially and operationally. So we started first load test, that is to stress the system with successive requests. Each request has a complex calculation of a propagation model that is going to identify the channels available at a GPS coordinate. So the database is responding in a few seconds the requests and with some resilience within a certain number of simultaneous requests in less than a minute. Remember that you're talking about machine-machine communication, the radio base station communicating to the database, not users. So these are times to start the commercial operation which are acceptable. And stability and strength have also been verified on the stress tests. So another takeaway message is that the database is implemented, validated, certified, and support a certain load of simultaneous requests. Now, I'd like to focus my presentation on a fun part of the project, so to speak, which is the campaign of propagation measures that we had in Ceará and the metropolitan region of Fortaleza in a radius of about 100 kilometers. See, the system is based on a propagation model that will tell the provider which TV channels are available at a certain place. So you have to have high reliability in the propagation test in this model. Although propagation models that we are using are acknowledged everywhere, NIC with UFC understood that for maximum safety to the regulator and radio stations, we had to validate that in field. So we went to field to measure TV signals, to raise data, and to compare to the models and have conclusions about the reliability of the message. So this is the map of points in the metropolitan region of Fortaleza, again, a radius of 100 kilometers. And I'm going to give you some more information about this activity. Very interesting that I believe brings reliability. So different scenarios. So we were in urban areas on the coast of the state of Ceará, a rural area, and a region that is with mountains. Not many people know it, but it is in the state of Ceará with some peaks that are 1,000 meters high. So we went to these places to test extreme cases. The measurement methodology is what we used for digital TV, the YAG antenna, GPS, and several measures per region for us to have the right statistics and then analyze the data set that was generated. So this is an example. This is a scale of strengths of signal for the measurements of channel 35, which is under SBT station in Fortaleza. And I'll explain why we chose SBT. So you see, it goes to from minus 20 to 90. Remember, the Brazilian model says the cutoff data is minus 77. So the measurer was beyond the limit for us to see all possible measures, even in places that we would expect not to have the signal. So you see more points in the city of Fortaleza and then in points a bit more distant from the capital. You see Fortaleza in the upper center part of the image, but then you have the coast, the southeast region with weaker signals as expected. So the measures followed what we expected. So in the measured values, we measured channel 35, but also 23 and 51. And this is just a side comment. We contacted TV stations using their official contact that is available at Anatel. So we contact them, we use the information from Anatel, and only SBT got back to us, which is channel 35. It is system Jangadeiro in Fortaleza. So they got back to us. This is the visit that we paid to them. We were very welcome. I would like to thank Engineer Esdras, that is the engineering officer of SBT in Fortaleza, and he showed us the entire engineering structure. We went to the transmitter, we saw the antenna, we saw their setup data for digital transmission, state-of-the-art equipment in Fortaleza, and that helped our models a lot because we had real practical information about that TV station. The other channels that we used in the process, we just used official data that is published in Anatel's Mosaic system. But with SBT, we use actual data provided by the TV station itself. So we were very fortunate to have access to the information because that really helped our study. So these are analysis of data sets. We used a method based on GD algorithm and also the propagation model. 50-50-50 is the long ray rise model, standardized at 50% in 3 parameters. So machine learning was closer. It had a better fitting. You see that blue and yellow line are prediction and measurement. So you see to your right, to your left, a very good fitting in machine learning. The propagation model for channel 35 in SBT has an offset, but the trend, you see, the offset is between the red and blue curve, but the trend is correct, and you can correct the offset with a safety margin. So practically, if you are going to take a look, for the exception of a single point, the method did not capture the right prediction of a TV signal at that place. And by the way, this point was the mountain region of Fortaleza that we considered an outlier inside the model. Just to mention the other channels in which we did not have the actual data, that is, we just used data from Anatel's site, prediction failed. The red curve was horizontal, so completely different from the blue line, which in our belief is that the data available is outdated. And channels did not give us precise information. So this is the statistic data. You're going to be able to take a look at the presentation on the website. Gilberto can also answer any questions that you have, so I'm not going to go into details. I just wanted to make it clear that the model is validated, it is operational, with some exceptions that can be addressed as outliers, and we are already testing the protocol in real time with the radio, which is an important advance to our project. Thank you very much.
Professor Rodrigo, professor Matheus,
I'm
gostaria de agradecer.
Professor Rodrigo, Matheus, thank you for the explanation. If you have any questions, if not, Júlio, that's up to you.
Alô?
Hello?
Oi. Tem dúvida do Douglas e tem da Natan. Se eu puder ir lá, Natan.
Posso começar?
Can I start?
Sim.
Yes.
Sou Douglas Fischer.
I'm Douglas Fischer. I'm going to try and cross some references we had yesterday and the day before. We had a presentation on the quality of Wi-Fi, and Maya asked a question about the reduction of the 5G spectrum to use in Wi-Fi or to be used by 5G from operators. And I think these are all correlated. The idea of using the spectrum with an entity giving you a token saying you can use it now because it's free, now you can't. I know there are institutions that are specific for that, Dynamic Spectrum Alliance, but is there any study to use the same idea, that is a dynamic use of the TV spectrum for other spectrums, for instance, 6G, because I think this is still something to be discussed in Brazil. Do you know if there's anything along these lines? Rodrigo? Well, thanks for your question. Your question is very interesting. I was supposed to say that, but I didn't. But none of these technologies, propagation models, protocol flows, requests for authorizations, computation of propagation parameters, tokens of authorization, this is all, something that can work at any frequency band. What we need is a database that is parameterized, and if there are primary users, which, can be TV stations, but can be other primary holder in a different band. But again, we have to have access to information so that we can have parameters. But we can say that we can transfer this knowledge, the database, this protocol, this algorithm, so to speak, to any frequency bands if the regulator believes that this is interesting and it is of national interest. So I would say that we don't have to have specific studies to think of, how we can transfer these concepts to different bands. But that can happen if there is the space and we are able to conduct tests and validations. Just to add to that, this protocol is at a layer of application within the device. These protocols, do they work with some kind of open code so that you can exchange information? You talked about an exchange of information and using RFC. Is that an open protocol? Is there anything in this line? The protocol is open, it's public. The implementations that are very specific are not that open. For example, now in 2025, in a partnership with NIC, we are going to compare what commercial equipment that implement the protocol indeed implement and test it with our application. So, the work that we are developing with NIC is still not available publicly. This is a decision that NIC may have, but we are still under development. But I believe that once the protocol is open, the idea is that this is also going to be available. Thank you very much. Questions and answers have to be fast because we are already past our time. Okay, everyone? Good morning. I'm Natália Fodet. I have been working with digital inclusion for 15 years. I come from legal, but I say I am a frustrated engineer. I have a question that is very similar to the previous question. But as you're saying about database, and we have been discussing that in different areas, I would like to know the following. I would like to ask about interference. We have for many years have been discussing the regulation of TV white space. And also, if you could talk a bit about geography. You're not getting to more hilly areas from what I understood. So what kind of population profile do you think you're going to reach? Well, thanks for your question. Well, first, implementation of Wi-Fi 6. That has to do with the choice of the waves of transmission. As I said, our radio use a waveform that has low emission outside the band. So if we are going to use the bands that we have, that wouldn't be a problem. It would be easy to implement. Now, as for location, if you want to use UHF, a lower frequency, the idea is exactly to get to these more distant places. So this is something that we want low band so that we can get to more remote places, hilly areas, and also it has to do with the installation of our transmission antenna. In our tests, because we are going to install the transmission antenna in our tests at UFC, that is a lower area, the reach is not going to be as good. But if the antenna were installed at a mountain area, then we would have a better reach. Good morning. I'm Moacir. I am a telecommunications engineer. Last year, we tested a radio with a manufacturer, and we tested it together the Federal University of Pará. And we detected a poor quality of Brazilian TV antennas. We bought models that individuals would buy, and the quality was very poor. So much so that the radio was not even able to transmit data. So that's the question. How do you see the quality of antennas in Brazil? Because it's not only the TV technology. We had other studies working with 2G, for example, and Brazilian antennas had very poor quality compared to antennas that were imported. Do you take that into consideration? I'm going to make a quick comment and then you can add to that. As for measurements, the measurement protocol, we had to use commercial antennas because it had to mimetize a real environment of TV users in Brazil. So we used antennas that Brazilian users buy at retail, so that we would really be reflecting the reality. But we did not compare quality. And we have to know what quality parameters you're talking about, if it's impedance, if it's gain. Yeah, it is reflection, VSWR. Yeah, antennas are a bit complicated for us to discuss briefly, as I was requested. But in the case of our radio, we want to use one single antenna for reception and transmission. So the antenna has to have a large band. And if you have a large band, then you lose quality. So, it is what it is. You increase bands, but you lose gain, you lose impedance, and you have to work with it. But the use of commercial antennas, will always pose this problem. This is my view. And just to add to that, in the field test that we are going to conduct, we are expecting to test different antennas that were proposed for this type of application. And after the test, maybe we can share the results with you and give you a bit more information on that. Well, thank you very much. Well, if you have any more questions, just talk to Gilberto and our two professors to answer your questions. If you are knowledgeable in antennas, you have a 10. So coffee break now. It's going to be where the exhibitors are, and we'll be back at 11:10. Okay?
Pessoal, vamos retomar as atividades. Bom, vamos retomar as atividades. Agora vai ter uma apresentação minha.
Shall we resume? Next, Moreiras and myself, we have two reports to introduce to you, one of them about engineering and another one about systems activation.
Anualmente a gente faz report das atividades.
Every single year, we will report all the NIC.br engineering services. So I'd like to share some novelties and some figures about what we have been doing lately and what we would like to pursue in the coming years. Overall, IX performance. We had a peak of traffic around 37.5 terabytes last July during vacation, school holidays. And now between January and February that we are going to have another summer holiday, and then in August. These are the holiday months when people will be using internet more frequently than other months of the year. In São Paulo, we have reached 25.7 terabytes per second. And here you can see some other sites numbers. Let me briefly highlight Porto Alegre city down south the country. Porto Alegre has reached 1 terabyte per second in the first quarter of this year, mainly due to all the environmental disasters that they went through, all the floodings, and that shows exactly how big their problem was, because that has affected their infrastructure and ASP's availability during the crisis, the environmental crisis. Here you can see the number of allocated ASs in Brazil. New ASNs, a total of 125 new ASNs connecting to NIC.br. Let me point out to Manaus in the Amazon region, where they had 65% increase in the number of connected ASs, probably due to the OpenCDN project, which is been on place over there. And in the past years, we have been following some figures where, more specifically in São Paulo, we are able to take other sites to our NIC.br with 190 presence points in a total of 190 PICs, which are our network interrelations. A total of 432 network equipments, 136 installed DWDM systems, 93 data center interconnections, DCIs. In São Paulo, where we apply 400 ZR with 278 interfaces and 165 installed servers at different places, and almost 5,000 participant ports. Here you can see a breakdown according to different regions, São Paulo, Fortaleza, and Rio de Janeiro. And we expected that the 100 giga ports would overcome the 10, but as we had increased the 400 size doors, it has decreased the 100 ones. So there is no surpass, but in fact we activate much more 100 gigabytes ports than the 10 giga ones. Technology changes, how about them? In the past years, we have been talking about EVPN, our desire to have a activated control program, which finally now is becoming a reality. We have a technology operating full size as expected. In Brasilia, our federal capital, we went through 3 phases of implementations. We started with EVPN plus MPLS. Last July, we migrated the MPLS to segment routing V6. And in August, we scaled proxy ARP to rule out the network broadcast traffic that is fully active in the federal capital. And since last September in the state of Paraná, Curitiba city, we have EVPN plus SRv6, but without the proxy features, which are not yet available at Cisco equipment, which is the one that we have in-house, and Cisco in Manaus, Amazon region, since last November. In São Paulo, though, we have today 3 different manufacturers' equipment in-house. We have some older devices from Extreme and Brocade, including some newer ones from Cisco and Nokia. And our goal is to break down the network, where we are going to have a part of the networking under VPLS and another one with the VPN and segment routing. Both Cisco and Nokia devices, they are able to address traffic to each one of their networks. If the network has EVPN availability, that will become a priority and the traffic will leap to EVPN. Otherwise, it sticks on VPLS. We do hope then to be able to migrate continuously and slowly and with transparency to everyone, to all users. In the second half of this year, we started a very significant round of equipment replacement. There were quite some old age 2 type of equipments which were replaced. And we keep on doing it fast. We have some equipments already running in the VPN and segment route V6, and throughout the process, we notify a need to some adjustment and additional corrections. Once that is over, we will speed up the migration process. Probably by the beginning of the next coming year. This is a baseline table where we list to each one of our vendors their different functionalities, the features they have in place. Some models, they have them available for some product of lines, others are under development. If we go into details, we will be able to find the solution to be managed. The network then that we are gonna use, but not necessarily everything will take place. It might be that partially it will be in place, but we hope to have equipments to deal with EVPN, CRV6, another one that will probably have EVPN, but without the suppression, and older devices, older equipments that will come just with the VPLS. So there will be a mixed up network with all equipments, different features, but yet we'll be able to manage traffic differently. AS, which may be connected to equipment which may run on VPLS, it will be connected. The whole VPN network will recognize the MACs. It will respond back to ARPs, ARPS, eliminating undesirable traffic in São Paulo's network. This afternoon, Fabio from NIC.br team, he is a network coordinator. Don't miss it. Follow his talk, which will be extremely technical for segment routing, IVPN. Don't miss it.
400 GB, né? Portas
400 giga ports in São Paulo. We already have in use Equinix SP4 and some other data center equipments available around. Once we see an increase on your demand, just let us know, as we are going to check the availability, and once that is available, we'll be able to activate it right away. We expect that by 2025, we'll be able to increase the level of availability to São Paulo area. This is the same slide I showed last year, where we would expect to be installing more 100 giga transmitters, but that unfortunately is not a reality. We believe that the 100 giga transceivers is quite too expensive yet in comparison to LR4. But try to find a solution with better prices. And there are some sites like Brasilia, the capital of the country, where there will not be 100 giga LR4 ports, but just for the LR1 and not for anymore. 1 giga transceivers, they are no longer activated. None of them. UTP, neither 1 giga. Those that is still run on 1 giga ports in the area of São Paulo, we demand you to exchange them for 10 giga ports. To be able to run on more modern equipments with updated features, if you just run 1 giga, that is going to be that is not going to be positive. It can be really deleterious to your system. Single VLAN and the ATM. We haven't got a VLAN for IPv4, neither IPv6. Those areas, they have already been activated with just one VLAN in the ATM at different states, Bahia, Roraima, and Pernambuco. and other sites also will be taken into account for further deployment. We had a chance to visit different Brazilian sites where we were able to identify new peaks. Our goal is to increase our geographic reach, to increase the connectivity. And those cities like Manaus, Belém, Goiânia, Vitória, and Florianópolis, they are in our radar to increase the coverage and to improve new connections. Today, we find quite hard to deploy optical fiber connectivity and to avoid excessive concentration at older hubs. We'd like to set remote hubs in those states where we are quite far away. So our goal is to improve it from capacity building increasing at each one of those sites. Today we have 38 under activities. We were supposed to have 39, but we had deactivated São José dos Campos town in the state of São Paulo. But anyhow, we are going to open a new PPT at Ribeirão Preto city that was supposed to be a high demand from the city providers. Therefore, by 2025, we expect to have some new areas included, such as Macapá, Ribeirão Preto, Petrolina, Juazeiro. These are different states, Pernambuco and Bahia. And we are always ready for any new opportunities that may show up. This is the problem root cause analysis, where unfortunately we see an increase of problems related to IXBR, especially in the state of São Paulo. We are strongly trying to improve and rule out all these issues, which unfortunately had led to a higher number of episodes. And our last updated information, Demi should have told you that we are about to open a new data center in São Paulo, which may be both positive or negative news. And why could that be a disadvantage? Because we are going to deactivate the UN hub. We operate on a business building, which is not an ideal solution for a data center. In case of any incident that may happen to any other occupants of the building, that may end up affecting us. Therefore, we decided to build up a new hub outside the downtown area, and we are expecting to start our operations at that new data center by 2026. Some consequences. The PIX routes that will reach the UN will need to migrate to the new hub, Santana to Parnaíba, and participants that will reach with a raised fiber, they should get prepared to migrate to NIC.JD or NIC.SP. And telco companies that work with optical fiber connectivity, you should see this new data center as a fiber arrival point, as other companies will be interested in getting their connection from this new hub. By next year, we'll be able to disclose some more detail and technical information about this new plant. So these are the latest information presentations. I'll be around until the end of the week. Tomorrow we are going to have a talk to IX and ask your questions. And that's it. Now, Moreira, please, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Bom. Alô, som? Tá sem? Não tem retorno? Não, retorno do som. Sim, mas não vai ligar aqui. Alô, som? Não tem retorno. Pessoal, alô? Não tem retorno aqui de som? Vocês estão ouvindo aí, mas eu não estou ouvindo aqui. Bom,
can you all hear me all right?
Passador? Obrigado. Bom, vamos, gente. Como sempre, da mesma forma que o Júlio colocou, a gente também faz report.
Always, we carry out an activation report together with my team, where we address some Open CDN initiative activities. So let's start from the activation activities. Over here, you can see the number of calls, but I did not include here neither Nokia calls, neither NOC, neither deactivation calls. I just related those calls which have to do with bilateral VLANs, where we see a year after year growth, and just few years where we see a decrease, around 6,600 open and closed calls, around 7,000 of those calls where we interacted and managed to respond back. So here you can see the number of open calls, closed calls, 40,000 interactions where our team had to interact with the calls. The average closing time is around 26 days, and the mean are 7 days. The meantime, 7 days.
Eu coloquei essa tabela com dados históricos aí, ano a ano, a partir de 2013, que
at this right table, you can see the evolution in number of calls, as well as different sites where our team works or operates. We have always had a very strong partnership with RNP, and in the past, local RNP teams would answer to the calls. Except for Porto Alegre, all other sites, they are now served by NIC.br team in a centralized manner. In addition to the increase of PPT, which had increased the number of sites, we had added new sites added to that centralized list of places that we work with. We have a much shorter team now, but yet I believe that they are going to be very fast and precise in the service that is delivered. Here you can see total time for a call, how long that call had lasted, for how long was that in our service line, waiting line, and that keeps dropping year after year, where we are able to be much more agile in delivering our service and to improve the level of service and also the time that takes to start and conclude each one of the calls. Over here, we can see the total time of service delivered and how long it takes once that you open a ticket for an analyst who is at our side to give a feedback. Today, our average time is 1 hour and 15 minutes. In most calls, we answer it back within this time, 1 hour and 15 times. In the past, that waiting time or duration time was much longer than it is nowadays. In the past 6 years, we have been working with NPS, which is a quality indicator. Anytime that we close a call, we can score that call from 0 to 10. And according to the results, 13% of all calls were assessed in 2024. And then we get an extractor throughout the NPS methodology. Those who are scored 9 or 10, we believe they are promoters because they are quite happy with the service. 0 to 6 are the detractors, people that will say nasty stuff about our services. And 7 and 8, they are neutral. They neither liked nor disliked. So we get the percentage of those promoters and we subtract the percentage of detractors, and then we get to an indicator. Throughout 2024, our NPS was of 96. Therefore, 96% subtracting the detractors, we decreased those detractors, and now we can tell that 96% of those who were surveyed, they are quite happy with the level of service that is delivered by us with excellence, according to those 96%. Last year, we were working on some systems, and one of the reasons why we were able to decrease service time and to improve some quality indicators. All of that thanks to NetBox. NetBox now is applied internally, and it allows to input any operational IX information, which now are gathered within that system that now runs on a specific plugin to some of those items to be managed by the NetBox. And we have been able to manage all TTPs of IX, all PTTs of IXBR over NetBox. The activation team, they do not access directly NetBox, but rather they work on an internal interface. They use the API, NetBox API, and anytime that there is a new call, a new activation, they have a similar interface to that one where all the information is filled out. As you might know, NIC.br is the largest in the globe, the one from São Paulo, I mean. And the growth rate I rephrase myself. Internal management systems, they were not always able to follow PPT evolution. As PPTs, they grew quite fast. Therefore, in the past years, we're trying to remove that backdrop, and now that backlash, I should say. And now in 2024, we had some attempts not successfully, but we will insist on that by 2025 throughout some tests where we are going to have a new interface to new participants. My IX, in the My IX, you'll be able to check which resources are allocated, which VLANs, which PPTs, all resources will be there available and listed in case there is a troubleshoot or anything that has to be changed on a more precise manner just by clicking over the port and so on and so forth.
We have been working internally in a model. This is a mock-up, but for now, just internally. Very soon, we are going to be showing you new things or to users to get feedback and start tests. OpenCDN, in the last 3 minutes that I have. OpenCDN, if you don't know it, This is a project of NIC.br that walks hand in hand with IXBR. And basically, we offer hosting to cache servers, connectivity for the update of caches of the main CDNs, and on the side of participants of IXBR, we also offer access to the content of the CDNs to whoever wants to join. And this is a shared costs project. Sometimes there are very high operational costs, data center, items to feed the CDNs, and these costs are shared with the participants of IX that want to use that. So we have many internet exchanges in Brazil. We always hear about that. And it's true that our country has the size of a continent. It's really a huge country. So it is not enough for a CDN that comes outside the country to connect to São Paulo and think that they are serving the whole country. Of course, São Paulo is a very good place to start because there are many people that is connected to IXBR São Paulo. But if the service or the CDN itself wants quality and reach to the to all, or at least most of Brazilian users, you have to be elsewhere. So, in our view, the main CDNs should be in all geographies of IXBR. Preferably, these geographies would be large or appealing enough with traffic enough for them to go on their own. But if not, through the Open CDN project that aims at lowering costs. So this is the concept of Open CDN. You have NAS connected to the local PTT. You have the physical structure. We invite the CDNs to be based there. And if they say so, we open the content to all ASs that are in that local PTT and that join the initiative. Today, we have that in Salvador, Manaus, Recife, Brasília, and Belo Horizonte. Different CDNs in each one of these geographies. We invite CDNs. We are not to convince them. We don't have any special power different than yours. It is a case-by-case negotiation. So we have different CDNs and different geographies, and we have lots of partnerships with data centers, telecom companies, local internet servers, and in many cases they offer sometimes free of charge resources for us to either start the project or actually operate it. So we have ENP, Serpro, Lojas Bemol, Century Telecom, Sempre Internet, and One Telecom, offering some kind of resources, links or data centers, and in some places, Open CDN has no cost to participants because precisely of these sponsors. This is the case of Belo Horizonte and Recife today. And we have geographies being actively prepared. Belém, Cuiabá, and Goiânia. Goiânia with the same structure of Brasília connected to two PTTs. In 2025, we want to go to other geographies in the same model. One current structure of Open CDN connecting to a second close by PTT, sorry. And we are interested in establishing partnerships and sponsorships. We have plans to improve the availability of Open CDN with more redundant second links and etc. So if you have a data center in any of the geographies of IXBR, if you think the project is interesting, or if you have a company if you're an internet supplier and you think that would be interested for some XBR, come talk to me or to Daniel, that is going to be in our booth today, and let's see if we can make it true. This is my last slide, just as a reminder. Our NIC.br teams often need to grow, they need more people, and we have some job openings at NIC.br. So go take a look at our website. I'm going to be here today, tomorrow, Friday. So come and talk to me if you're interested. We are way past our time. I'm not going to open for questions, but here you have my contact information.
Obrigado, Moreiras.
Thanks, Moreiras.
Agora eu gostaria de chamar o
Now I'd like to call Michael Bushan from Nokia. We had the pleasure of watching his presentation in a Nokia event this year, and he is really, someone that stands out. I hope you like the presentation. He has a fantastic message to share with us. Michael?
Check. Okay, my name is Mike Bouchong. I do data center things at Nokia. This is the hardest room imaginable to present to because there's no noise and audience feedback. So if I tell a joke you like, just put your hands up in the air and that'll count as clapping. Now, the difference between marketing and actual stuff is like basically the name of my title here. If you were to look at in the program, the actual name, and I'm going to use my phone to make sure I get this exactly right. Redefining the network infrastructure for modern data centers. So I have no idea what that means. So I'm going to talk about data center futures because I do know what that means. There we go. Now, if you've seen any vendor presentation in the last, let's say 2 years, this is the kind of stuff that we put up when we talk about data center futures. We believe fundamentally that the future is going to be at the intersection of applications and users and data, and we put pictures like this up because we imagine that the future of data center fits in your hand. Nobody thinks about a hand when they think about their day-to-day data center stuff. This is absolute garbage when you think about where things are going in the future. But that's okay, because sometimes we'll get more specific. We want to talk about the role of artificial intelligence. We'll tell you that networks will be cognitive, that they're going to be self-healing. We're going to talk about preemptive measures and the role of things like machine learning. How many people actually think about cognitive networking on a Wednesday when they're doing their day-to-day? Like nobody, right? I got one guy here shaking his head, so I'm going to make eye contact with you. No one else here matters. It's just me and you. Now, it could be that these things actually matter, right? It could be that the future of data centers is going to be driven by AI architecture. Now, of course, that presumes that we need to rationalize InfiniBand versus Ethernet, that the answer to that is going to bring some set of lossless features into Ethernet, that those features will be important across the entire set of data center applications that we use. Not every data center is an AI data center. When we look at things like scheduled fabrics and pushing intelligence into the data center so we can handle traffic and push back on servers that are driving too much traffic into the data center, it presumes that we're not going to push that to the smart NICs and leave the transport kind of dumb. But it could be that AI architecture drives the future. Maybe you're somebody who believes that the future is all about AI ops, that we're going to somehow use information to create self-healing networks. Have you ever talked to anybody about AI ops? When you talk to them, the first use case they always come up with is how do we detect optics failures? Now, ignoring the fact that that's basic thresholding and doesn't really necessarily require AI, linear regression doesn't count as AI for any mathematician at least. When you ask them what the second use case is, they actually don't tell you. it's very easy to arrive at optics because we have lots of information about optics and we have a large number in the network. But when you start looking at data, use cases beyond optics failures, it gets a little bit quiet. And so maybe AI ops isn't necessarily going to be the future. Now, I'm not anti-AI, just to be clear. But when we talk about the future, I think we have to be grounded on what's actually going to happen. When we look at things like AI ops, that also ignores the fact that information is contextual, that data that resides in one network doesn't necessarily apply to another network, and so the models themselves have to change, and there's an operational burden to make all of that happen. Maybe you believe that the future is network as code, that fundamentally everything is going to go to DevOps and CI/CD pipelining, that we're going to go and look at how do we pipeline information, handle data normalization across systems, and then handle everything in complex environments. Of course, ignoring the fact that most people don't have teams of software engineers that are handling operations in their environments. And so operations at Google or at Amazon or at Microsoft are going to be very different than operations in other environments. Or you could be like me and say, you know what? None of the above is likely to be the future over the next 3 to 5 years. Now, I want to be really clear. I'm actually very pro AI. I've gone through and built out AI architectures. I'm very in favor of AI ops. I actually have acquired multiple companies in space. I do believe that the future will have elements here, but I think we're at a very dangerous time in our industry where the separation between what's happening on the ground and what's happening in marketing is so different that it threatens to actually stall our entire industry. And so what I want to talk today is about that difference. Now, if you talk to anybody who actually operates data centers and you ask them a basic question, what do you want out of a data center? What's important to you? Now, I have good friends. I actually got them on a podcast. I got Jason Eslick at Zoom. I got my friend Russ White, who's at Akamai. I got my friend Michael Winston, who's at a financial services company called Fiserv. And I got my friend Lindsay Hill, who's at a company called Valve doing gaming stuff. And unscripted, I asked them a basic question. I said, what do you guys want in a data center? And without any prompting, the first 3 words that came out of their mouths, it just works. The first thing they said wasn't, I want AI, and I want self-healing, and I want cognitive. What they said is they want a data center that just works. When we talked more about this, I said, what else do you want? Okay, it has to work. You need it to be reliable. You need equipment and software that will function as expected. What else do you want? They said, we want it to be easy. None of that is what you hear out of marketing folks. Now, I had to convince some of the Nokia people this is what people actually want in a data center. This isn't sexy. What they want is something that's easy. And then the last thing they said, and they didn't use the word affordable, they said they want it to be cheap. That's it. This is what people want out of data centers. Now, if this is what they want out of data centers, then when we, oh, I'll get a picture here. We good? Okay. If this is what people want, then why do we talk about everything else as if that's going to be the future? How can the future be so separate from what we want today? So let me talk a bit about that. It just works. Is it the case that data centers just work today? Now the next slide, get your cameras out because this next slide is controversial, okay? I've taken the names off this slide so that I don't want to incriminate anybody. This slide is about what's called CVEs. A CVE is a customer vulnerability exposure. This is basically an OS vulnerability. CVEs are not tracked by vendors. They're tracked by the US government, the US Department of Commerce, an organization called NIST. This is externally available data, so it's an apples-to-apples comparison. And these are, each column here is a vendor network operating system. The 2 on the far right hand are both the same vendor. The next 4 after that are another vendor. The next one after that, labeled 23, is another vendor. And then the 2 on the left are another vendor. I'm going to leave the vendor names out of it. That's not the point of today. The point is that if you were to look at the left-hand side, you'd see 2 vendors with 7 and 23. If you looked at their right-hand side, you'd see 2 vendors with 463 and 299. The difference between the right-hand side of this graph and the left-hand side of this graph is like 65x. When there's a 65x difference in vulnerabilities, now let me be clear, this is not a perfect measure of quality. Every bug is not a CVE, but if you were to review the CVEs, every CVE is a bug. And so what we see is that there's dramatic differences in performance across the people who provide equipment and software for the data center space. When people tell you that the #1 requirement is that it just works, what they're secretly telling you is that it doesn't work today. If I asked you today, how many of you are going to buy a new car in the next 5 years? And then if I asked you, of the things that you care about in your car, how many of you would list an engine and 4 tires as your #1 requirement? None of you would. Because you would presume that every car has an engine and 4 tires. When someone tells you the #1 thing they want is it just works, what they're secretly telling you is the pain point that it doesn't just work today. Now, why do I start with this when I'm talking about the future of data centers? If we pile on innovation after innovation after innovation on a foundation that fundamentally doesn't just work, I'll go back, there we go, then we will struggle to have the entire networking stack actually function in a production environment. We have to get this part right, and this means that when we think about innovation, it's not just about what we do 5 years from now. The things that we do right now in the OSs matter. Speakers today have come up and they've put charts up there. The last speaker had information taken from Netbox. Actual stats, real telemetry, things that come off the box, to make that connected to like an AI future, the foundational requirement is these things have to work. Now, on it's easy, how many people, show of hands, think that networking is easy today? Nobody? Not even one? Oh, come on, guys. Networking today is crazy hard. What time of year do you think networks are most stable? Now just think to yourself, because the room's kind of difficult with the headsets. If you're thinking the holidays, you're right. Which means that we've built out a discipline where our stuff works best when everybody stops touching it. Networking is not easy today. We have to rationalize when we look at automation. Most stats today, if you exclude the cloud high flyers, will tell you that networks are somewhere in like the low to mid 20% automated today. That's percentage of tasks. Now, if that's true, then we have to rationalize how we can invest millions of people hours over multiple decades and still only arrive at this level of automation. Now, I'll offer today that there's 2 possible solutions. It could be that we've delivered 217 tools to date. And what this industry's been waiting for is the 218th tool. And that tool is going to be our breakthrough moment. Or it could be that we haven't actually been solving the right problems and that there's a foundational obstacle that sits between what we want to do and how we do it today. Now, to answer that question, I want to use, I don't like using car analogies, but I'm going to use one today. If I ask people today, why do you want to automate? Most people will tell me that they want to automate because they want to be more agile. If you talk to a marketing person, they'll say they want to move at the speed of business, whatever that means. I want you now to picture when we were trying to set land speed records. It was in the US, in the deserts in Eastern California. Picture like kind of white, hard clay. And when we tried to set land speed records in the 60s, basically the theory was in order to go faster, what you had to do was build a bigger engine. And the biggest engines that existed at the time, they were on airplanes. So the theory was if you take an airplane, take the wings off, put kind of big goofy wheels on it, then you can go faster. Now, I like to make fun of the British people Their airplanes didn't look quite as nice as the US airplanes back in the 60s. Then some people figured out what's faster than an airplane? A rocket. Let's just put a rocket on wheels. That counts as breaking the land speed record. My personal favorite, though, this one looks like Tom Cruise from Maverick, if you've seen the movie. This guy comes out looking pretty cool. Now, if the key to going fast was building a bigger engine, show of hands in the audience, how many people are driving jet-powered cars today? Nobody? Why? Now, I was in the car yesterday for 2 hours to get from the hotel or from the airport to the hotel. I know why you don't use jet-powered cars. Your traffic is insane. People would die if they used jet-powered cars. The guy on the lower left, you'll notice he has a helmet. That's because when people did these land speed records, people died. And when speed is lethal, it's not functional. And so what they had to do in order to go faster, it wasn't getting a bigger engine, it was solving the lethal problem. It was seatbelts, airbags, driver assist. We're actually driving faster than we did in the 60s, but we do it because of safety, not because of the engine. So the question now is networking safe? I told you earlier that the time that networks work best is Christmas. So we know that networks are not necessarily safe. But go to your browser, for the Telic guys are here. Some of them are on LinkedIn. Come off LinkedIn for just a minute. Go to your browser. Do a search for me in Google Images. Search push to production on a Friday. Okay? And if you search for, then these guys will tell you if it works. Push to production on a Friday. What you'll see is this. Deploy on a Friday, they said. It'll be fine, they said. One does not simply deploy on a Friday. What do we say to deploying to production on a Friday? Not today, folks. It was an election year in the US. Don't deploy to production on Fridays. Joe Biden, this dude gets it. But my personal favorite is this one. We do this not because it is easy, but because we thought it would be easy. Networking is crazy hard. And so we have to think through, if we cannot push to production on a Friday, but the future of data centers requires us to make it easy, then what do we do to make it easy? What stands between us and automation? Well, it's going to be safety. And so I ask you, I want you to think in your head, what's the safest industry in the entire world? Think through what industry you think is safer than any other. Now, here's the reason safety is going to matter. Automation is not good. Automation is neutral. It's an amplifier. It takes things that are good, it makes lots of known good. But if things are bad, automation's the fastest way to break things at scale. If you don't believe me, ask our friends over at one of the hyperscalers. I won't name them because I think this is recorded and I don't want to get in trouble. But they leaked a route in their data center about 18, maybe 20 months ago. Their data center had a cascading failure. Their badges were essentially connected to their data center. They had to break into their physical buildings, saw into their cages so they could connect console cables and recover. This is why we have to make it safe. Now, if you've got that view of your safest industry, now I want you to think it. Don't say it out loud. If you're thinking aviation, you can give yourself a pat on the back. Aviation is by far the safest industry in the world. If you were to look at fatalities per passenger mile flown, what you would see is that aviation is the safest way to get to two different places. You're more likely to die walking, across the street than you are flying an airplane. So what do we learn from aviation? Aviation, at the outset, the first basic thing is everything is redundant. When you are on a plane, you'll notice there's two engines. You'll notice that there's two pilots. You'll probably notice, if you're lucky, there's two wings. In networking, that joke never really kind of works, and with a translation, I'm not really sure, but I appreciate the laugh, sir. In networking, we have the same idea, right? We have multiple paths. Non-blocking fabrics are about providing redundant paths. We might multi-home servers, but even things like multi-vendor support start to add redundancy into the supply chain because we saw that we have to be able to get equipment when we need it. So redundancy matters in networking. If you've ever boarded an airplane before the plane pushes back, you'll notice that the pilot and the co-pilot are doing checklists. A true story. I was boarding a plane to India. I was in New Jersey about maybe 2 months ago. And once we got on the plane, we pushed back 50 feet. A passenger fell ill. We pulled forward 50 feet. The passenger disembarked. They had to run through all the checklists another time. You see, in aviation, there's no discretion. You have to go through the checklists every single time. You can't just say, oh no, it's okay this time. In networking, we can do the same thing. We already do syntax checks. We can do things like configuration checks for things like policy, where we want to make sure we've got consistency. But when we move to declarative models, we can do checks against those models. We can do things like validation using digital twins. We can create what looks like a set of pre-flight checks that allow you to stage changes before you push them to production so that you know what the impact of the changes is going to be before you try to push it out. And then finally, we know that in an airplane, if you picture the cockpit, there's lots of dials and meters and sensors. And we know that this is the way that we get in-flight information about how the plane is performing right now in the moment. In the network, we have the same. We can look at things like, certainly SNMP. Who here is still using SNMP? No, put your hands down. You should not be proud about using SNMP. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. We can use SNMP. We can use things like gRPC. We can use GNMI. We can use in-band telemetry like LFA. There's all kinds of different things that we can use to get the real-time performance of the network and pull that out. Now, if we pull these three things together, then this is what the future of operations starts to look like. This has a name in our industry. We would call this intent-based networking. Intent-based networking, for the people who don't like marketing buzzwords, intent-based networking is simple. Networking today is a bottoms-up exercise. If you set hundreds or thousands of lines of configuration across dozens or hundreds of devices, then you slowly step away and don't touch anything because you don't want to break it. That's how networking works today. Intent-based networking is the idea that we want to shift networking from a bottoms-up proposition to a top-down endeavor. What do I mean? Instead of specifying syntax, let me instead describe what a data center looks like. Let me use familiar constructs like YAML so that I'm not transacting in vendor-specific syntax. I'm merely describing what does a data center look like. How many leafs do I have? How many spines do I have? What protocols do I use? What is my edge policy? And let me then use the tools to translate that model into on-device behavior. That's the basic idea. Now, the hard part of this, by the way, is that we then have to trust those tools and not the individual people to go and manage the network. People is the hardest part of getting networking right going forward. But if we do that, you see wholesale changes in how networks operate. First, because we're working with models and not vendor syntax, by design, this ends up being abstract. And if it's going to be abstract, then the tools can handle translation into any vendor NOS that you want. That part's important because if we want to unlock multi-vendor in real environments, and if you look at the museum at the outset where there's different vendor gear there, you'll see multi-vendor is a big part of what you all do. It gives you things like procurement leverage so you can keep pricing low, but it also allows you to choose based on feature availability or maybe based on product availability if lead times are bad. But the very natural outcome of abstraction is going to be multi-vendor support. Semantic separation, good luck translating that, by the way. What does that actually mean? Everyone in here is a network engineer, so how many people are getting younger? No, not even one person? So here's the problem. Network engineers, we entered the market, if we're being honest, late 90s. I'm almost 50 years old, which is insane. I don't know when I got old. We entered the market in the late 90s, early 2000s. As we age out, the next group of network engineers, are they going to come out of university with networking degrees? Probably not. They're more likely to come out of school with some experience with AWS or Azure and a familiarity with a whole different class of tools. So in your environment, how do you hire people like that if your entire operating environment requires you to have effectively a 4 or 5 letter vendor certification to prove that you can memorize the commands required to run a data center? The workforce is going to change, and when it changes, it's going to be a different set of tools that people use to operate it. I'll say this is a big part of where the industry goes. And the future of data centers will be driven as much by the people as it is by the technology that serves those people. The models that I talked about will be expressed via blueprints. Those blueprints give you the advantage of repeatability. You see, it's not that speed is not important. It's that you cannot go faster by focusing on speed. You go faster by focusing on safety or reliability. When we get it right, though, the byproducts of reliability are speed and efficiency. So once you have repeatable motions, it becomes very easy to do the same thing every time without fail. And then finally, what we want to do from there is measure the baseline. If I know what the model looks like, then I should be able to model network and device state and look and say, does this network and device state match what's in production? How do I connect my telemetry to my expected values? And if I do that, then what I can start to do is measure performance against expected, not just performance in absolute terms. When we measure performance against expected, that gives us some early indication of what's working, and then more importantly, what's not working, where it's not working, when it's not working, and then in some cases, why it's not working. That's going to be where data center networking and operations goes. And so I joke, I say, if you're too afraid to push to production on Fridays, then maybe you shouldn't push on any day of the week. What we've got to do is we've got to figure out how we can allow people to push to production on Fridays. Okay. So we've talked a bit about it just works. We've talked a bit about it's easy. It's cheap. Look, I don't have to show you slides on that. That's a dynamic NVIDIA versus Broadcom, kind of the war that's playing out over AI data center and sort of AI transport. What's going to happen there is that competition is going to drive pricing. So everyone here will benefit from essentially Broadcom and NVIDIA having to fight each other, because we can't afford as an industry to have a sole source in any part of our industry. Otherwise, we lose kind of economic leverage. Now, if we do this, I will tell you that the future of data center isn't going to be defined necessarily by some specific technology piece. It's going to be defined by driving human error to zero. Like that is the thing that we will transact in. Only when we can be certain that the things that we're doing are going to work can we hope to have a foundation that's solid enough to build on top of. And now I want to make a fairly impassioned plea. Our industry is at a breaking point. I've run multiple data center businesses over my career, spent kind of on the vendor side. I have gone and I've developed strategies. I've traveled the world to talk to groups of people to try to help them make decisions. I've helped them grapple with transitions from one technology to another technology. I've helped them understand the implications in their teams, in their tools, and in their processes about where they have to go. I will tell you this: the difference between what we're talking about and what people are actually doing has never been wider than it is today. And the problem is when things are too far from reality, when the marketing hype exceeds what the on-the-ground realities are, then at some point you stop listening. And when you stop listening, two things will happen. One, you get in a position where you can no longer even entertain progress. It's no longer possible to move forward because the gap between what people are telling you you can do and what you can actually do is so wide that there's too much risk and your management won't allow you to make that kind of change. If that happens, we lose. But even more disastrous than that, if we fundamentally believe that our industry is going to move forward on the next big hypey thing, the next thing that has so much appeal, and then as a result, we accelerate the development of that thing on top of a foundation that's not fit for purpose, then what we will do is crater networks across the globe. What we need to do is get out of this idea that the next big thing is the next big thing. Because it could be that if marketing is right, networking is going to be crazy exciting. Or it could be that the future of networking is going to be in Pablo Escobar's hands, and that the future of networking is not the next big exciting thing. It's what I would call boring innovation, making the things that ought to work the way they ought to work. That's where the future of networking is going to be. I predict that what happens over the next few years is that we see a return to basics so we can meet actual on-the-ground requirements before we start building in the next big thing. Because the future, if built on a poor foundation, isn't a future I want to be part of. My name is Mike Bouchon, we're Nokia, and this is Pablo Escobar's Networking for the Future.
Obrigado, Michael. Dando sequência aqui para a última
Thank you, Michael. Now we are going to proceed to our last presentation of this morning session. And I'd like to invite Andy Rivers. He is representing today Microsoft, and he'll talk about how to take control on Microsoft content with Microsoft Internet Cache. Connected cache, I'm sorry, Microsoft with connected cache.
All right, good morning, everybody. Can everyone hear me? All right, great. So first slide. There we go. Okay, so as the title of this presentation shares here, this is Microsoft sharing with you all how to take control of your static content egress. I'm Andy Rivas, and I am a principal product manager at Microsoft. There's my family, including my dog Spuds there. So I'm going to start with some easy Microsoft trivia here. Who are the founders of Microsoft? Everybody knows this answer, right? Bill Gates and Paul Allen. What is Microsoft's AI companion called? You almost can't turn on any news without hearing this word, Copilot. Copilot this, Copilot that, Copilot everything. Now for these next three questions, I have some help here, and I'm going to distribute some prizes here. A t-shirt. What is the most current version of Windows? And anybody can raise your hand if you want a t-shirt. Anybody? Oh, right there. What is it? Windows 11. That is correct. That man gets a t-shirt. It was that easy. Next question. What year was Microsoft founded? It's a big anniversary coming up here in 25. Nobody wants a t-shirt? 1975. 50 years ago. So Microsoft's been around for 50 years, quite a while. And the last question, what is the first piece of hardware created and in what year? Anybody have the answer? A mouse in the year 1983. But I'm not here to talk about all this trivia. This is just kind of a lead in here to talk about Microsoft content delivery. So I work on Microsoft's content delivery team, and we we work with a portfolio of CDNs. We have client software. We have services that manage the secure, reliable, and efficient deployment of Microsoft content. Did you know that there are over 2+ billion Windows and 10 and 11 devices out there? My team owns this delivery optimization service, and we handle over 1 trillion operations for download and peer-to-peer per month. So it's quite a large service. And we have built a product, and this is in the spirit of this conference and of net neutrality, where customers can deploy their own software-based caching solution. Internet service providers, transit providers, internet exchanges, anyone. And it relies on this secure, reliable, and efficient content delivery platform that Microsoft has built, delivery optimization. And so if you are out there running Windows 10 or Windows 11, hopefully today, as Windows 10 end of service is actually coming up a little less than 1 year from now. So a lot of customers in Brazil are going to be downloading that upgrade to Windows 11. So some of the benefits of this Microsoft Connected Cache is obviously, as it is a local caching solution, it's going to reduce traffic on your backbone. And in the spirit of make it easy, there is absolutely no content management required. Once you fire up the cache and deploy it, and it's configured for your network, automatically the content will be cached and the devices will be able to pull it. And it is very, very, very flexible. In fact, I have just, we as Microsoft have actually just released a preview of the enterprise version of this, which runs on any of the laptops in here, providing they're not ARM or Mac. But yes, it is very flexible, and it improves your customers' download experience. Although what I will say is that most of our customers' downloads are happening in the background. But if there are some applications, for example, things like that, looking at data for Brazil, we see about a 50% increase in download, but that's going to vary based on networks. We have been in a public preview, which is essentially GA, for about 3 years now. We have cache nodes deployed in 90+ countries, 350+ operators, and we have 500+ cache nodes. No, there are not 500+ blue dots there. That wouldn't be possible to represent. But if you would notice, there's a pretty high concentration of cache nodes that we have deployed in Brazil, and then also if you look in the APAC region as well. And so then getting local here for Brazil, there are about, as Microsoft measures through our download statistics, there are about 500 million active Windows devices downloading content daily. And then as far as Microsoft Connected Cache deployments for Brazil, we have 60+ customers, 80+ cache nodes, and that represents approximately 14% of the static content downloads. And earlier it was mentioned that the Open CDN product, or the Open CDN initiative, they have deployed multiple cache nodes. So now you may be wondering, if Microsoft offers peering, why would I need caching? So this is the traffic, the different content that flows. And common misconception is that if there is peering available, that all of that different content, both the static, what we would call static content, and the dynamic content comes through that peering link. But that is actually not correct. The content that is delivered through that peering link is actually the content of Teams calls and video streams, Azure services, multiplayer game traffic. The rest of that content is delivered through third-party CDNs. And this is where Microsoft Connected Cache comes into play for you. You can deploy a Microsoft Connected Cache node, as many as you need, into your network, and then if either you or the internet exchange you belong to have a Microsoft Connected Cache server and peering, that content is then going to be delivered through your Microsoft Connected Cache node. So this is just a really quick step through of how this works. On the next slide, I will claim that it takes roughly 1 hour. I have personally deployed this many times. Probably the most time that's going to be spent is preparing whatever hardware or VM with the proper OS that you need. And so once you get that ready to go, then you can go through a portal within Azure. And I actually forgot to mention this word before, but it's free. This is absolutely free. Microsoft does not charge for this. There is no metering, even though you're hearing Azure. It is a completely free service that is offered through Azure. It's simply required to sign up for it. And so once you have that piece of hardware prepared, and then once you have gone through the Azure portal and you have your ASN registered and you have created cache nodes and you have configured within the Azure portal all of your information for BGP, then you can begin to then install. And it's run by a very simple installation script, very, very easy. Those in the room who have performed the installation will know this. And then once all of that is then configured, simply initiate an iBGP session with a router or route server that sits in your network of the operator or of the exchange. And then once that is complete, as I had mentioned before, and I'll kind of circle it there, if I could put a heart around it, I would, but deliver optimization services that exist, which are already communicating with those 2+ billion Windows 10 and 11 devices out there. That is really what is at the heart of this. When you initiate that BGP session with the cache server, we then collect all of those prefixes. At that moment when a device phones home, which it phones home periodically, or when it is about to initiate a download, at that moment there is a prefix match that happens. And if the IP address of this client, the public-facing IP, matches the prefix that has been configured in the through the BGP session there, then those clients will begin downloading content from the cache. So they're going to request it from the cache. It's going to use the same internet link that as if it were a client in your network to actually fill the cache. It's using the exact same protocol, and it is filled on demand. Once again, easy. You don't have to worry about cache fill. You don't have to worry about off-peak bandwidth. If the device, for whatever reason, if the cache node is unavailable, all of these devices will seamlessly fall back to CDN. We have designed this so that you do not have to worry about outages. If you need to apply some sort of patch to your machine, or if there's some problem with the device, no need to worry about that. And these are all of the steps that once you have downloaded the PDF, you'll be able to see those. This is what I have just shared with you. Here are some pictures of the Azure Management Portal. You can see there that I have my cache nodes that have been created there. This is the UX that we used for the basic configurations. This is the IP address of the server. You're going to put that information here, and this is what will get populated within the delivery optimization services. You can specify a maximum egress there, and then this is how you can then configure routing for the cache node. And we've actually provided two different means. You can use manual prefix configuration, or if you'd like, as I had mentioned before, you can use BGP, which is very easy. There is a BGP implementation that is on the cache server itself. And so if I am operating an internet exchange, does Microsoft Connected Cache work? Yes. And so if your exchange and if the devices are connected to the public internet, you simply peer the Microsoft Connected Cache server with the publicly available route server. If you are in the case, and I do have some Exchange customers who are in this situation where they have some sort of private fabric where the cache server cannot be exposed to the public internet, there are actually two ways that customers have solved this. You can have the cache node itself initiate an eBGP session with the router that's in that private fabric, or you can essentially inject the private routing table onto the actual host machine itself, and then you can initiate an iBGP session there. So what if my network is operating within a CGN? This just works. So this actually mimics what our enterprise customers have. So if you think of an enterprise customer, they have a completely private network, and so the IP address of the connected cache server may be in that private address space. But then whatever the public IP that is reported out to our services, we will send back to it that private IP, whatever it may be, of that cache server, so that those clients can then be routed to it. Here are some sample hardware configurations from an Edge POP here at the top. So this is a very modest 8-core, 16 gigs of memory, one hard drive, up to we have customers who are running much larger configurations than this. And then here we have some sample caching data. This particular customer is not operating in this region, but I've shown it anyway just to show that they see about 80% of their content for those clients in their network that is coming from cache, and they see a variation between 95 and 99% cache hit ratio for them, and you can see the specs of their machine there. And this is actually sample caching data from Forte Telecom, who is here. They're running on an Intel Xeon 48 cores. They actually have 2 of these machines, and they have around 400 ASNs that they are serving content for. So some of you or some of your customers may be receiving content from this cache server already. So with that, that's it. I've left a few minutes if there are any questions. I'm going to be here all day today and tomorrow. Feel free to flag me down if you would like to learn more about this product. Thank you very much.
Bom, pessoal, agora a gente chegou na hora do almoço. Então, na área
Now it's lunch time. Lunch will be served for you. It's like a buffet, lunch buffet, some sticks, and we are going to be back at 2 o'clock. Those who are following us online, don't forget to switch your link connection for the afternoon session. See you later. Have a nice lunch.